Why, hello there. I hope you're having a good day. It's a kind of a cooler day here in Portland. We're having a bit of a cold front come through, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Um, so today I'm drinking an Onyx coffee, um, Juan Jimenez pink bourbon. It's a really, really light, delicate coffee. Definitely really enjoy it. So today we're going to talk about two books. The first one is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El Akkad, published in February 2025. This book is a lot emotionally. It is challenging. It is not going to be something that a lot of people are going to be able to be comfortable reading, and it really forces you to take a look at what America stands for. It's a direct condemnation of the Biden administration, of Democrats more broadly. It talks about the DNC committee, the conference when Kamala Harris was formally elected as the candidate, and how the Democrats were walking past protesters with their literally fingers in their ears, like children. And it's also a condemnation of the American system in general, because it really does look at what America stands for, and argues that there is no moral center to the empire of America, and that we are just as empty as any other empire. And the second book is American War, by Omar El Akkad, published in January of 2018. And this book is about a second civil war that takes place in 2074 and continues through 2095. I really feel like this book should be turned into a movie. I think it does a really good job explaining to Americans using American locations what we visited on in Afghanistan and Iraq. It does a good job of explaining how the U.S. would fracture. I think it's much more realistic than Alex Garland's Civil War, because it separates into the North, the historic South, kind of the core of the Deep South, and then also a portion that becomes a Mexican protectorate, which I think is somewhat realistic as well. Of course, these two books are written by the same person, but I think they work really well together as a discussion point. And that's because I think that if you look at One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This as a piece of art in the American war world, I think it would be part of the process of deconstructing America's power and America's influence across the rest of the world. And what happens in American war is, at one point, the rest of the world just says, you know what, we're not going to bend the knee to the United States, and breaks the United States power over the rest of the world. They basically say, you know what, we're not going to listen to your vetoes in the UN anymore. We're going to actually go in and stop genocides that the U.S. supports. And that has significant impact in what happens afterwards, because the United States, a new empire rises, and that's in the Northern Africa to Middle East. And it is basically all the countries that were part of the Arab Spring joined together to create one new empire. And so this creates a new counterpoint to both China and the United States. And they've already been on their own in a lot of ways. They're not really tightly linked the way that the United States and China are with trade. I would say that North Africa is closer to Europe, But even Europe kind of backs away a little bit and kind of turns in on itself in a lot of ways. I think the reason why this sort of thing could start is because of one day. It really does a good job showing that the emperor has no clothes. That our core is about capitalism and protecting the U.S. empire and protecting the business interests of multinational conglomerates and enabling our military industrial complex to continue to profit. And I think that's really tragic, because I really do, on one level, believe that the United States was started with a general idea of enlightenment and what government could be. Even at the beginning, though, it was horribly flawed because we had slavery, and in a lot of ways that slavery and the concessions made to slavery essentially corrupted any really novel behavior that government could have taken. It was always going to be somewhat corrupt. And I think that corruption has never gone away. And I think that in American war, it is just taken to the extreme and shown that there is a strong disconnect in a lot of ways, that Civil War never ended, and we're still paying for that now. And the other thing that I found interesting is that Akkad kind of argues that in terms of between Biden and Trump and what America really is, Trump is more honest to what America is than Biden is. Biden still has that veneer of civility, that veneer of wanting to be doing the right thing and claiming we're doing the right thing, whereas Trump is America's id. He is a moralless, corrupt human being who is very self-centered, always wanting to have more, and in a lot of ways the U.S. empire has been that way. And especially since Trump has been talking about wanting to annex Canada, annex Greenland. He wants to bomb Mexico to stop the invasion. That's all part of the hunger of the American empire to continue to grow. And Trump definitely enjoyed that AI video of Trump's Gaza. That really represents what the American enterprise is about in a lot of ways, and it's heartbreaking. I think the real power in American war is that it explicitly takes the horrors that the U.S. has visited on in the Middle East back on America. Akkad calls out in one day that he actually wrote specific things in American war based off of what American government has done. For one thing, there's a speech that's included from the leader of the Bozizi Empire, which is the one in the Middle East, that was basically word for word the same speech that Obama gave in Egypt during Obama's administration. And one of Akkad's editors was like, this really just shows how empty that empire is. And Akkad didn't really correct him to say that's Obama. That's us that you're saying is empty. And then the other one is there's a camp called Camp Patience, which is a recreation of a camp that happened in Lebanon after the Nakba, or at least part of the early 80s expulsion of Palestinians from Israel into Lebanon. And there's a camp there called Patience. It's called Sabra and Shantilla. And it is basically what happens in that camp in real life is what Akkad makes happen in this camp is basically right at the Tennessee border, and the Union soldiers basically do the exact same thing. In a lot of ways, it was pretty well tempered. I went and read some of the accounts online, because there were people who were Arabic who read this book and said, why didn't you make it worse? Whereas Americans were like, why did you make this so bad? Americans wouldn't do that. And I think that kind of belies the fact that we have a vision of our own superiority, where America has visioned these and has delivered these atrocities on countries all over the world. I mean, Vietnam, we know we did these things. There were horrific pictures that came out of Vietnam that showed what atrocities Americans were willing to visit on people. We have Abu Ghraib, where you have all these smiling women and men torturing prisoners. And in American war, that's brought back on American soil with an island called Sugarloaf that's in the Florida Sea, because climate change and global warming has melted all the ice caps so that Florida turned into an ocean. And there's an island there called Sugarloaf, which is essentially Gitmo and Abu Ghraib. And it's shown that torture is visited on one of the I guess you would call her a terrorist or revolutionary. Her name was Sarat, and she goes through all the same torture that the Bush administration allowed as part of the enhanced interrogation. You know, blinding lights, cramped positions. Sarat is my size. Like, she's easily taller than me. She's 6'5", and definitely like a very strong person. And ultimately she breaks from being waterboarded, and she gives up anybody and everybody. She just starts making stuff up. And it really highlights the uselessness of that technique, because sure, some people may have led to good intel. Like the person who influenced her, trained her, taught her to become a sniper, he gave her up because his daughter was threatened. And sure, those techniques might lead to some real valuable intel, but there's also going to be a lot of fake stuff that comes out of it, where people are going to be accused of things that they didn't do, and it's going to lead to needless suffering. And ultimately, that's what happens towards the end of the book, where Sarat is asked to sign away her rights to sue, to say you were actually innocent, and told she was innocent, and allowed to leave. It's a really smart thing to do, because these are things that the U.S. government has done in all over the world. And having this revisited against Americans makes it more personal. Like, I know a lot of Americans know people in the South, or they have family who's visited. I have family in Atlanta, or in Atlanta area. I haven't seen them in years, but I do have family down there. So a lot of Americans have a solid understanding of the geography of the South, and it brings everything home in a way that talking about, Fallujah just doesn't. I think that Arabic, and I know for me, and I find Arabic words harder to hold in my head than Spanish or Germanic words. And I know that's 100% a me thing. I am not doing enough to try to understand those languages. I am keeping it foreign in some ways. And I think a lot of Americans do that. And the consequences of that is that it doesn't feel like it's happening in reality. But whenever you're talking about something happening in Tennessee, or you have, the oil fields are this in Texas, or a three-way war between the Union and the South and Mexico, that becomes very real at that point. Even though that is just what has happened in Iraq with ISIS and Syria and all those things, is just putting them back in the United States. The weird, soft borders that are included in this are very much like some of the soft borders that are resulting from colonialism in the Middle East. And those things, I think it's important. It helps really make it something that we can hold on to as Americans and understand. And the other result of this is that when there's a theory, it's called blowback, and it's generally that the cycles of violence result in blowback and radicalization of other people, and you can see that with what are called homicide bombs in American war, which are basically what suicide bombs are in the Middle East, but they're just called homicide bombs to differentiate them. And I think that's more what Americans would call them. Terrorist, like bombings and things like that. Sarah, whenever she was young, her name was Sarah, and she decided that her middle initial was a T. She liked it as because of the t had a more definite ending than Sarah, which kind of like is a sigh off into nothing. Her father gets killed in one of these homicide bombs whenever he was trying to go get a work visa to go up work in the North. And that radicalized her. And that's really what made her susceptible to being trained by someone who was seeking people to become homicide bombers, that were trained to conduct guerrilla warfare, to go across the border and shoot high value targets. And one of them is that she goes across to shoot a general, and that's ultimately what leads to her brother. They go across and they attack a shipment of food and supplies and civilians, and that's what brings the Union back, and that further radicalizes Surratt to the point that she is 100% committed to the cause and is willing to do everything except for a homicide bombing, because she has family who's alive still and she wants to continue supporting them. So she found it more important to become a shooter and a sniper instead of a homicide bomber, which ultimately has more impact on the war anyway, because she kills one of the major generals. And this is the sort of cycle of violence that we're seeing with Gaza and Israel, where a lot of people are acting as of October the 7th, when Hamas attacked and killed 1,200 civilians, as the start of this war. And it wasn't. It's been a constant back and forth since Israel was formed. And as I said in my video from the message, that there's a colonial aspect to this, and it is a group of people who are trying to defend themselves, and they have the right to defend themselves in that. But that leads to escalation, and eventually the colonizing power just decides that they're going to dominate and crush the other side, and that's where you get the genocide. That's where you see things like Camp Patience, where you have 3,500 people being wiped out, and the real Camp Patience is even more brutal. And the ultimate escalation is that somebody is willing to use something that is abhorrent, during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Reporters were really concerned about a dirty bomb coming to America. You can see it in television shows like 24 and some other ones like NCIS, and a couple movies where somebody brings in nuclear material and they go and set it off at a football stadium or something. And then the fallout's much bigger than that, so that it hurts thousands of people. And then, the whole point of the rock is that they're going to send biological agents into San Francisco and kill millions of people. And ultimately, that is what happens at the end of the American War, where the new empire, wants to completely destabilize and destroy the old empire in somewhat a sense of revenge, but it's also like making their hold on the world permanent. They use her as the spread of a virus that is very fast spreading, that has a very high mortality rate, that ultimately kills 110 million people. And so she dies of this, but she also Sarat dies of this, but this empire commits a genocide of unspeakable proportions, and even worse than what the American empire has done in these recent wars, but maybe not as bad as what the European empires have done across many generations. I think these books are critical reading of our time right now, especially given the turn of the Trump administration, trying to rule as kings and explicitly trying to expand as an empire. He's seriously suggested the annexation of Greenland, Canada, bombing and invading Mexico, and has started an economic war with the entire world through tariffs. And I think that this is unacceptable. The time of empire has passed. We need to refine or create that moral center that we claim that we have had all this time, that we should be a force for good. We should be out there, like I talked about in my Everything is Tuberculosis video. We need to be out there solving diseases. We have the scientific infrastructure that if we invested trillions of dollars in it the same way that we invest in the war machine, we could eradicate hunger, we could eradicate many diseases. There's no reason why we can't do that. If we can choose to invest $1 billion in dominating the world, we can use USAID and other mechanisms to become a hegemonic empire through soft power, which ultimately I think is a better mechanism of control anyway. Not that I want us to be controlling, but if there is one that's preferable, it is soft power. You have people who are excited to see you. Whenever you use hard power, like in Iraq, you create cycles of violence. I would rather us use trillions of dollars and better the world. So I'm going to leave the discussion of these books there. I think that they're really amazing books. I highly recommend them. If I had to say to read one, and you wanted to read a very emotional book, read One Day, Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. It is such a beautiful and powerful book. If you want to read something that's a little easier to read, but still challenges you, American War is very good. And again, I really think that this should have been turned into a movie. It still can be. And I think these are required readings for right now. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment, if you have a recommendation for a book, I'm happy to read it. I'm reading a book right now that was recommended in my last video. It's going to take me a little while to read it and get through my other videos before it comes out, but I'll definitely put it out. And again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good one.